If I was to play a man on the street with you today and ask you what is peace, what do you think you'd say? Hold that thought. We're talking about who God is, and we're doing this by we're studying God's names, plural. You see, God didn't just give himself one name, and by the way, I have to take a time out here. Hold on, quick thought. It's September, and you guys are used to this by now, right? September, October means water bottle for Barry. So God didn't give himself one name. He gave himself many names. And we've been looking at all these names of God, trying to understand who God is so that we would know who it is we come here every Sunday morning and choose to worship. We've looked at names that means the Lord is my shepherd. We've looked at the name that says the Lord is my provider. We've looked at the name that says the Lord is my healer. We've looked at the name the Lord is my banner. And we've also looked at the name as the Lord that makes me holy. And, well, today we are going to talk about a name that you probably already know. Jehovah Shalom. Your term. Jehovah Shalom. And you know what Shalom means, right? It means peace. It means the Lord is peace. Now, this brings us back to that important question, because if the Lord is peace, then I guess I need to know what is peace. Because I want to know God, and if I want to know God and God is peace, then I have to find peace in order to know God, right? And that's where that little video came in. They went to an elementary school and walked around with a microphone and a camera. And that's always dangerous when you do that with kids. Because you are going to get kids that make the little antler ears behind people and the bunny ears. And they're going to do all these crazy things. And you need to understand that the Lord is peace. But you also need to understand, for some, peace is the absence of things. Peace is the absence of judgment. It means that nobody is holding anything against you. And that was brought up in the video. Not judging one another. For some, the peace is the absence of chaos. They used words like calm and in control. Things are peaceful, is what we like to say. For some, peace is the absence of anger. Everybody has a smile on their face. Everybody is always happy. Nobody is upset. For some, peace is the absence of violence. Being at peace means that you're not at war. It means that there's nobody out there that is seeking to get you. There's no war, and nobody's going to be violent. And while for some, peace is the absence of things, for other, peace is the presence of some things. We like to say peace is the presence of love. You know, that thing where we all get along. You know, we have these meetings. We nickname them at work Barney meetings. And what a Barney meeting basically is where we all get together from different sites that LexisNexis is on, and they get us all together, and we stand around, I love you, you love me, we're a happy family. They try to get us all on the same page, and we call them Barney meetings. They get us together and just try to get us to like each other, and that's okay, but that doesn't make peace just because I like you or I love you, right? Sometimes peace is the presence of family and friends. Just being around people that are familiar to me. If you think peace is the presence of family and friends, come with me to Lynchburg. I'm going to see my family. And usually, that ain't peaceful. It's just not. It's chaotic to me, but that's just me. Sometimes the peace idea is the presence of tolerance. I don't necessarily have to like you, but I can at least figure out how to get along with you. I can figure out how not to let our differences come between us. And then, of course, sometimes peace is the presence of calmness. I have a chair. It's a reclining chair, and it's Daddy's chair when I can run everybody else out of it. But it's kind of that place. Everybody knows that when I'm saying I'm going to sit in my chair, they know what I'm looking for. It's really simple. Leave me alone. I just want to sit there and just stare in space. Just be calm. Because that can bring peace, right? But if you look at that video, you have to understand that in that video, everything about peace is external. Did you notice that? Everything is on the outside looking in, and that's a problem because if God is peace and everything is external, well, that means peace can be created under the right situations. Isn't this what we are trying to do in our world? We're trying to make it where we can sign treaties and we can come to an agreement and we can come to these situations where nobody's going to be fighting anymore and we can just be at peace. Isn't this what the world means when they say peace on earth? It can be had for the right price. If you're willing to sacrifice enough and you're willing to give away enough and you're willing to compromise enough, everybody can be at peace. But at the same time, peace is out of my control. I mean, because I can only make myself peaceful, right? I can't make you peaceful, and I can't make you peaceful, and I can't make you peaceful. I can only do what I can do about me, so if there's no peace on earth, then it's not my fault because I'm doing all I've got, right? But then we get to Jehovah Shalom. The Lord is peace. And we're going to go looking for this God today, this name today, and we're going to find it in an odd place, a really weird place. We're going to go to the book of Judges. So if you have your copy of God's Word, you can make your way to Judges chapter 6, verses 11 through 24. We'll be there for the most part. And I find this a weird place because we're back into our last stop on the Hall of Faith. We put these pictures up in the very first sermon series of the year, and we've been going back to them at various points in the year. And we're back down here, and we're going to the last stop we're going to make, and we're going to be back over here in the book of Judges, and we're going to be looking at a gentleman named Gideon. Jehovah Shalom. And Gideon, well, Gideon finds himself in the middle of chaos. An odd place to go looking for the God of peace, but if you look at verses 11 and 12, this is what it says. The angel of the Lord came and sat down under the oak tree at Ophrah. All right, I got to tell my joke. Did y'all know that they had talk shows in the Bible? Of course so, because Gideon went to Ophrah, right? Okay. But this is why I preach and don't tell jokes. Okay, so sat down under the oak tree in Ophrah that belonged to Joash the Abiezrite, where his son Gideon was threshing wheat in a winepress to keep it from the Midianites. When the angel of the Lord appeared to Gideon, he said, "The Lord is with you, mighty warrior." So in spite of my bad joke, here we are. We're going to get introduced to the God of peace, to the God is peace. And we get the idea that it's not all going so well right now because there's chaos. God's people, when we get here, are at war. Sort of. There's a war going on, but the reality of the situation is God's people are hiding. God's people are sitting in, this is when a warrior, and he's sitting in a wine press. You know what a wine press is, don't you? It's a ditch. It's a great big hole that somebody dug nice and deep, and the idea was they filled it up with grapes, and then people get in and they step on it and they squish them and they make wine, and then they take them out and they fill it with, this is what they were supposed to be doing in here. And here is this soldier sitting down in a hole just trying to take a rock and pound some wheat into to get the kernels out so he can make some flour. And he's hiding it because he's afraid if the Midianites see him making bread, then the Midianites are going to come and take away the bread. God's people are in hiding. And the God of peace shows up and he's looking for somebody to take a stand. Now, this is a little bit backwards from what I usually think, right? Usually if I'm looking for peace, I'm not looking for somebody to take a stand. I'm looking for somebody to give some ground. I'm not looking for somebody to take a hard line. I'm looking for somebody to say, time out, let's sit down and talk about things. But God is looking for somebody to stand up for what is right. He's looking for somebody, anybody that's willing to get out of the ditch and take a stand. And so he comes to this dude named Gideon. He sends this angel of the Lord down. And, well, Gideon talks to the angel. And personally, I think at this point, if I was Gideon, I'd be getting a clue. But I don't know. Maybe he disguised himself. He didn't really realize it was an angel. But he begins to talk to the angel. And I want you to see that at this point, the Israelites felt like they had been abandoned by God. They just felt abandoned. Listen to how Gideon starts his conversation with an angel. "Pardon me, my Lord," Gideon replied, "but if the Lord is with us, why has all this happened to us? Where are all his wonders that our ancestors told us about when they said, 'Did not the Lord bring us up out of Egypt?' But now the Lord has abandoned us, given us over to the hand of Midian." I want to break down this response. Because honestly, I think this response fits a lot of us. It can fit me when we get into those personal pity party moments. And the first thing Gideon wants to know is what's happened? Why are these bad things happening? I don't deserve this. Man, I should be able to go out and make bread wherever I want. Remember, God, you promised us that this would be the land of plenty. This would be our land. And why are all these bad things happening to us, God? It's your fault. And then he moves along and he wants to know, where's our miracle? Isn't that funny? Whenever I am in deep conflict, I want immediate relief, and I want a miracle from God. I really do. I've prayed for miracles before, and I have to be honest with you. I think I've seen a miracle in my lifetime, because there are still a bunch of doctors that are scratching their head about what happened. So I think I have physically witnessed a miracle, but whenever bad things are happening, whenever things are complicated, we always want God to do some great wonder or sign. We always want God to give us some big billboard to say he hasn't forgotten us. Well, Gideon takes it a step further. Remember the good old days? He reminds the Israelite and the angel about Egypt. Now, I'm sure every time God looks at the Israelites, they say, "You remember Egypt? You know, back when things were good for us? Back when we were all happy? Back when we were getting what we wanted? Back when we were just all fed and we were all good?" Every time the Israelites get in trouble, you know what they want to remind God about? "You should have just left me in Egypt." I'm sure God's like, "Okay, I'm really tired of hearing about Egypt. Because you have forgotten you were slaves. You were persecuted. You were oppressed." Here's the funny thing. Gideon's probably never even been to Egypt. I mean, the idea here is that the Israelites left Egypt, and if you remember the story correctly, they came across the wilderness, and they got to the promised land. They were standing there at the river, and they refused to go in, and except for Joshua and Caleb, none of them would go in. And so God said, "Fine, you guys that came from Egypt, go on back out to the wilderness until all of you are dead except for Caleb and Joshua." And at the beginning of Judges, before we even get to Gideon, we find out Caleb and Joshua are dead. So all the people that had ever experienced Egypt were dead. But guess what? Everybody wants to remind God about Egypt. Because that's us. Whenever things aren't going well, whenever things aren't going the way we want them, we always want to look going back from where we came instead of where God wants me to go. That's easier. It's easier for me to say, remember the good old days when the church was full and we had more than we could deal with and all the things were going good and there were kids aplenty and everybody was happy and everybody... The thing is we forget about what it was really like. Things are indeed changing in our world. We can't go back the way we were, just like the Israelites could not go back to Egypt. They had to move on. And so Gideon comes to this conclusion that since bad things are happening, since God isn't working any more miracles, and I'm not as happy as my ancestors were in Israel, that must mean God forgot us. God brought us out of Egypt. God brought us over here. God set us in the middle of this terrible place, and he just forgot all about us, and he doesn't care anything else about me, and he's just given up on me. And the problem with that is it fights against exactly what the premise of the book of Judges is. If you go back to the beginning of Judges, and right after Joshua died, it said, after one generation from Joshua, it says, everybody did what was right in their own eyes. Everybody decided, I'm going to live my life my way. Everybody said, I'm going to do what I want to do. And it wasn't that God forgot Israel. It's that Israel forgot God. They got so tied up and so focused on what I want out of life that then when God finally sent somebody in there to waken them up, they didn't know anything to do except for blame God for the problems that they're having. And don't tell me that we don't get there sometimes. Don't tell me that we don't get to the point that we think, well, God, you just have forgotten all about your church. Lord, we don't understand because we're doing everything we can, and why don't the people just come into the building? But you have to understand. The Israelites were living in foreign territory. The Israelites failed to take care of the enemies in the way God told them to do it, and they decided they were going to try to coexist with the enemy and try to live with the enemy right on their back door, and eventually, guess what happened? The enemy became the enemy. And I think our churches have done the same thing. We've gotten to the point that we've tried to coexist with the world. We've tried to coexist in such a way to make things so even, so tolerant, because we want peace, that God is just now looking at us and saying, I don't want peace that way. I want somebody that's going to take a stand. I want somebody that's got some fire in their belly that wants to go out and take a stand. Not that you have to be cruel and pick up a sword, but God wants people that are not willing to take peace at the price of giving up on beliefs. But aren't we doing that? You see, God's not looking for a miracle. This is what it says in verses 14 through 16. The Lord turned to him and said, now I want you to notice something changed. There was a sleight of hand here. There's a changing in the word. At the very beginning it says the angel of the Lord came down. And now when we get down to verse 16, there's a word missing. It's called angel of. 2 words missing. Now God himself is going to give a message to Gideon. The Lord turned to him and said, go in the strength you have and save Israel out of the Midian's hand. I am sending you. Now, God is speaking, and Gideon decides to respond. Pardon me, my Lord, Gideon replied, but how can I save Israel? My clan is the weakest in Manasseh, and I am the least in my family. The Lord answered, I will be with you, and you will strike down the Midianites, leaving none alive. God calls Gideon. Gideon states his case about God abandoning him. Gideon states his case about how God has left him. Gideon states his case about how God isn't working any more miracles, how God hasn't done this, and how God hasn't lived up to his end of the bargain. And God just simply looks at him and says, fine, go. What? No, God, you misunderstood what I was saying. I wasn't volunteering to go fix the problem. I was just telling you there's a problem. And God's like, go. And immediately Gideon starts to focus on his weaknesses. He says, God, you don't understand. You got the wrong address. You turned left on the street when you should have turned right, because you're sitting at the house from the man that is from the weakest of the clans, and my family is the least of that, and I am the least in that family. You have got the wrong man, God. I don't take stands like that. I'm too little. I'm too small. I'm too insignificant to make a difference. But God doesn't look at Gideon's weaknesses. He focuses on his willingness. You see, God turned it around on him. God turned it around on Gideon. He said, don't worry so much about your weakness. I just want to know, are you willing to go? And I promise you that if the second you are willing to go, don't worry about your weaknesses, you will be successful at what you do. You will strike down the Midians. And let me tell you how good your victory is going to be. There isn't going to be a single solitary one of them left alive. That's an impressive promise. Now, Gideon's sitting there, and I'm wondering if he's pondering this. And as he's pondering this, the light bulb comes on. It's almost like, in the little cartoon when somebody has the idea and it goes, bing. Well, Gideon realizes that, he's dealing with God. He isn't having a dream. He isn't sitting out there and he's suffering from heat exhaustion. He hasn't been working so hard that he can't understand. Gideon realizes he is dealing with God, and his perspective changes immediately. This is what it says in verses 17 through 22. Gideon replied, if I have now found favor in your eyes, give me a sign that it is really you talking to me. Okay, that's a good idea. Please do not go away until I come back and bring my offering and set it before you. And the Lord said, I will wait until you return. Gideon went inside and prepared a young goat, and from an ephah of flour he made bread without yeast. I'm just wondering, why was he crushing flour in the hole when he had yeast and goat inside? I don't get it. Okay, putting the meat in the basket and its broth in the pot, he brought them out and offered them to him under the oak. The angel of God said to him, take the meat and the unleavened bread and place them on this rock and pour out the broth. And Gideon did so. Then the angel of the Lord touched the meat and the unleavened bread with the tip of the staff that was in his hand. Fire flared from the rock, consuming the meat and the bread, and the angel of the Lord disappeared. And then here's what it says. When Gideon realized that it was the angel of the Lord, he exclaimed, Alas, sovereign Lord, I have seen the angel of the Lord face to face. So God is talking, but the angel is standing there in front of him. And Gideon realizes, and I want you to know, the first thing Gideon realizes when you're dealing with God, what does he have to do? I got to make a sacrifice. Lord, I got to give you something. And keep in mind, like I said before, he was crushing flour and it looks like he was meager. Gideon wasn't as bad off as we thought he was. He ran on inside, and in no time at all, he whipped up a nice goat and a couple of loaves of bread and some broth, and he was all good to go. His life was a lot better than we thought it was, wasn't it? And then he brought it back out and he gives God an offering. You see, Gideon's realizing that peace has got a price. Peace is going to cost me a little something. And then he asked God to give me a sign. God, give me something. And unfortunately, he asked for a few more signs. And he just kept asking God, prove it, prove it, prove it, until God finally said enough. But then he realizes when he's face to face with God, he thinks he's doomed. You ever been to that point? Man, you just think God is out to get you. You just think God's got everything against you. And so he thinks he's going to have a problem. But then God introduces him to Jehovah Shalom. You find him in verse 23. But the Lord said to him, Gideon, peace, shalom. Do not be afraid. You're not going to die. Now, I want to apply God's response to us because I think his response to Gideon is important for us because the first thing he tells Gideon is peace. Now, the word peace there literally means calm. I almost get the picture that Gideon saw who the angel was. He wants to get the paper bag. And he's like, Gideon, calm down. Gideon, chill out a little bit. Gideon, just take a moment. Gideon, be calm. Gideon, don't get so excited about the situation. Because Shalom is here. Jehovah Shalom is here. And then he tells Gideon, do not be afraid. Now that's easy for you to say. You've never actually talked to God. Well, maybe God has talked to God. I don't know. But you've never actually been in this situation. And now you're telling me, don't be afraid. Well, this phrase, do not be afraid, is the one that we translate in the New Testament in the Greek, fear not. It's the one that we're going to read a lot when we go through the Christmas story. Whenever an angel showed up, it's like, fear not. Don't panic. Come on back inside the window. The world's not ending. I'm just here to give you a message that's for you. Don't be afraid of it. Gideon, I'm sending you. Don't be afraid of what I want you to do because I will be with you. And then he gives Gideon a great guarantee. Wouldn't you like to have this guarantee? Gideon, you're not going to die. Now, eventually Gideon did die. I hate to tell you this. Gideon is not still with us today. Gideon did eventually die. But what the Lord is saying, this mission I'm going to give you is not going to kill you. What I'm asking you to do might stretch you. It might challenge you. It might just kind of make you feel totally stressed out. But it's not going to kill you. That's some great reassurances, isn't it? Maybe this is what Paul had in mind when he wrote to the church in Corinth. But we have this treasure in jars of clay to show that all surpassing power is from God and not from us. We are hard pressed on every side, but not crushed. Perplexed, but not in despair. Persecuted, but not abandoned. Struck down, but not destroyed. You see, in our Christian walk, Jehovah Shalom gives us some promises from peace. And I don't know that I necessarily like the promises, because I would like them to be worded a little bit different. But I want you to see them, and maybe it will make things clearer for you as what God is asking us to do as a church. He says, you will feel pressure, but it will not crush you. If you're going to walk this Christian life, you will feel the pressures of life. There will be stress. There will be tension. But here is my promise. It may drag you down, but it will not crush you. Okay. I guess that's good to know. I'd rather be no stress at all, but if I got to deal with stress, it's nice to know God is not going to give me so much stress that He will let it crush me. Might let you come close, but He's not going to crush you. You will at times be confused, but it will not cause you despair. God promises you're not going to understand everything all the time. That's good to know, because I understand very little most of the time. But God says, you don't see the whole picture. I do. You will feel confusion sometimes. But He'll never let that confusion cause you despair. He's never going to let you get to the point to where you just have nowhere else that you can turn. You will be persecuted, but God will be with you. Now, personally, I would like the promise He made Gideon here. You will be persecuted, but they're not going to kill you. That isn't what He says. He says you will be persecuted, and in that persecution, the only thing I can promise you is I'm going to walk through the persecution with you. Okay. That's pretty good. Same promise He made to Gideon. Gideon, you're going to have to go to battle, but I'm going to go with you. He promises us you may even be struck down, but the chaos cannot destroy you. It may knock you down so many times that you just don't feel like getting back up, but whatever they put in front of you, that chaos cannot destroy you, because God says, I am with you. Jehovah Shalom. No matter where you end up in life, God is already there waiting for you. Notice I changed the little phrase there. It's not wherever you go in life, God will be with you. Wherever you go in life, God is already there waiting for you to get there. He knows where you're going. And this is the peace that He's offering. But I want you to pay really close attention to Gideon's situation, because Gideon understands peace. So Gideon built an altar to the Lord there and called it Jehovah Shalom. The Lord is peace. To this day it stands in Ophrah of the Abiezrites. That's hard to say. So Ophrah's got the altar, just in case you want to know. I have never seen it, though. So here we go. But I want you to see Gideon builds this altar, and he says, okay, God, I understand peace. But guess what? Gideon's problems were not solved. The Midianites were still out there. The Midianites still wanted to wage war. The Midianites were still a formidable foe. As a matter of fact, Gideon understands peace, but his battle was just beginning. He was still going to have to go around and convince troops to follow him. He was still going to have to go around and weed the troops down. He was still going to have to go out to battle God's way. His problems weren't solved. His battle was just beginning. It's just that what changed was his perspective. Because now he understands when God says Jehovah Shalom, He's reminding us, I'm in control. What you're going through is my plan. I have a plan for how this is all supposed to end. And so here's the question. Would you like to experience perfect peace? We already studied earlier this year how Gideon's story ends. But let me just give you the summarization view. He went out there and he weeded his troops down to about 10% of about 1% of what he started out with. And then God said, lay down the swords, pick up the torches, pick up the clay pots, put the clay pot over there, go up there and stand up there and yell, yay, for God, and then broke the temple, and I'll take care of the rest. That's a dumb battle plan. I'm sorry, it just is. That's not good strategy. But Gideon already understood who the Lord of peace is. And so what that means is that Gideon now, with that understanding, could go all the way through the battle. Perfect peace. When God said, hey, ask anybody who wants to go home, Gideon didn't say, well, Lord, I don't think. Gideon said, okay, who wants to go? Get. When he says, hey, take the men down by the river and have them cup the water or drink the water, and God said, send those home, Gideon didn't ask God. He didn't question God. He just, okay, go. And I'm sure as he began to look at the troops, he's kind of like, okay, God, remember, I'm not supposed to die at this. But Gideon understood peace. He understood that this was God's battle, not mine. And I think we need to remember that. If we want peace, world peace, we have to remember to allow God to control and not myself. And that's a hard lesson. That's a complicated lesson because I like control. I do. I love control. I hate giving up control. But the truth of the matter is that life works out so much better when I let God control it. And I just kind of take along for the ride. We are going to do a time of decision. And so let me ask you, have you met the Lord of peace? Or is your life kind of in turmoil? Notice I didn't say chaos because God doesn't get rid of the chaos. But he does get rid of the turmoil. He gives you a focal point so that your life doesn't have to be pulled in multiple directions. You can focus on God. Do you have that? If you've never experienced Jehovah Shalom and you've never committed your life to him, this time of decision is for you. But for those of us that have done that, this time of decision is for you to remember how far God's already come with you. Go back and look at your life and all the battles that God has already won in your life. Do you really think he's going to quit now? Do you really think he's going to give up now? That would make no sense. Jehovah Shalom started this work in you at the beginning, and he's not going to quit till he gets to the end. He is going to walk with you. He is going to support you. But here's the trick. It only works if you allow him to control the walk, and you stop trying to give God directions. Will you please stand? We're going to pray, and then we're going to sing.